Jessie Dean Hoffman Jr. spent 26 years on death row, his life hanging by a thread as appeals dragged on. But the horror that sealed his fate was the chilling execution-style shooting of a young woman he'd just kidnapped and raped at gunpoint, her naked body left discarded in a remote Louisiana wilderness. To grasp how a promising teen turned into a monster, we must rewind to the turbulent beginnings that planted the seeds of rage. Smash that subscribe button as we dive into their dark stories, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Born on September 1, 1978, in Louisiana, Jessie Dean Hoffman Jr. entered a world already stacked against him. He was one of 5 children in a struggling family that barely scraped by, their poverty a constant shadow that forced them to uproot and move to Florida before settling into a modest housing development. Money was tight, and home life was far from nurturing. His mother, overwhelmed and harsh, ruled with an iron fist. As punishment for minor missteps like stealing food or small items, she'd lash out with a thick belt, leaving welts on young Jessie and his sibling. In one brutal ritual, she'd force their hands onto a scorching hot stove, blistering their skin as a twisted lesson in discipline. These acts of abuse weren't isolated. They wove a fabric of fear and resentment that Hoffman carried like invisible scars, shaping a boy who learned early that survival meant enduring pain. Jessie threw himself into school and sports, becoming the quarterback of his high school football team, and earning straight A's all the way through 11th grade at Kennedy High School. Teachers saw a bright, driven kid who could outsmart challenges on the field and in class. But cracks began to show when he started dating his girlfriend. His grades slipped, distractions pulling him away from the straight path. He graduated in 1996, just months before everything unraveled, but even then he hustled with multiple jobs to help support the family, flipping burgers at a restaurant, cleaning at an inn, and eventually valet parking cars in bustling New Orleans. These early hustles hinted at a resilience born from hardship, but they also exposed him to a wider world of temptations and pressures. What hidden anger simmered beneath that all-American facade, waiting for the wrong spark? The crisp November air in New Orleans carried a deceptive calm on November 20. He'd only been on the job for about 2 weeks, a fresh start after high school, juggling it with the news that his girlfriend was pregnant and the lingering trauma from a humiliating armed robbery 3 months earlier, where assailants stripped him naked and left him running home in shame. Psychiatrist Slater pointed to these pressures: poverty, abuse at home, and that raw violation as fuel for a simmering rage. But on this fateful evening, they ignited into something unimaginable. What if one wrong turn in a parking lot could shatter lives forever? As the sun dipped low, 28-year-old Molly Elliott, a vibrant advertising executive known for lighting up rooms with her warmth and kindness, wrapped up her workday and headed to the garage to fetch her car, just like any other Tuesday. She had no idea that Hoffman, on a break from his duties, was lurking nearby, armed with a gun and a desperate impulse. In a swift, terrifying moment around 6 p.m. he approached her in the dimly lit garage, forcing her at gunpoint into her own vehicle, a white Ford Mustang. The abduction marked the start of a nightmarish timeline that would haunt her family for decades. Hoffman, behind the wheel now, drove her to an ATM in New Orleans East, compelling the petrified Elliott to withdraw $200 while he stood menacingly beside her. Grainy surveillance photos captured the sheer terror etched on her face, eyes wide, hands trembling as she complied, a silent plea for help that no one saw in time. This wasn't just a robbery, it was the beginning of an ordeal that stripped away her dignity and dreams, leaving her husband Andy and her mother devastated, wondering how a routine evening could end in such profound loss. From there, the horror escalated as Hoffman steered toward a remote, wooded spot near the Middle Pearl River in rural St. Tammany Parish, about 40 miles away, a desolate crime scene shrouded in darkness and isolation, far from the city's light. He raped her there, forcing her to strip naked and walk toward a dock, amplifying her vulnerability in the cold night. Then, in a chilling execution-style act, he shot her once in the head, the bullet piercing her skull but not killing her instantly. An autopsy revealed she lingered in agony before death claimed her. The tragic impact rippled outward. Molly, a loving wife and daughter whose laughter filled homes, was reduced to a discarded body in the wilderness, her final moments a blend of fear and helplessness that underscored the fragility of safety in everyday life. How could a young man with potential descend to such brutality, robbing the world of a woman full of promise? After the deed, Hoffman callously drove back to the city in Elliott's car, ditching it and slipping back into his valet shift as if nothing had happened, his uniform hiding the bloodstains of his secret. He went home that night, carrying on with life while her family reported her missing, their worry turning to dread. But cracks formed quickly. On November 28, a duck hunter stumbled upon her nude body near the river, sending shockwaves through the community. Her loved ones identified her, their grief raw and unending. Police zeroed in fast. The ATM photos showed an African-American man in a jacket matching the parking garage uniforms, and records confirmed Hoffman was on break during the abduction window. Arrested just 2 days after Molly Elliott's body was found, he first told detectives he'd left his valet job briefly to deliver medicine to his girlfriend via bus in New Orleans East, a simple errand he claimed. But when police poked holes in that, noting no bus routes matched, and his unexplained 2.5-hour absence from work, Hoffman pivoted to a wilder fabrication. 2 armed black men had hijacked him, forcing him into a car with a towel-draped white woman, making him stand guard at the ATM while she withdrew cash, and even coercing him into sex with her before one took her away alone. No gunshots heard, he insisted, and he bussed back to work. Under intense questioning though, the facade crumbled in a videotaped confession where he admitted the kidnapping, robbery, rape and shooting, but swore the gun fired accidentally during a struggle as Elliott grabbed for it. Was this a desperate teen's panic, or a calculated bid to dodge the ultimate penalty? What truths lay buried in those evolving lies? The prosecution dismantled Hoffman's defenses piece by piece, turning his own words and the cold facts against him, like a noose tightening slowly. The bus alibi fell apart when bosses confirmed his long break matched the crime's timeline, and no records backed his routes or the medicine story. The 2 men shattered by ATM surveillance photos showing only Hoffman looming over a terrified Elliott, no accomplices in sight and his fingerprints on her car, plus the $200 withdrawal he later spent shopping with his girlfriend. As for the accidental shooting, forensic experts testified the single bullet to Elliott's head came from 18 to 24 inches away, with knee abrasions suggesting she was forced to kneel in an execution pose. Hardly a chaotic tussle. DNA from sperm and epithelial cells at the scene matched Hoffman with odds rarer than 1 in a billion, while her naked body discarded in the woods screamed premeditation, not mishap. Witnesses who found her clothes in a vacant lot in her abandoned Mustang sealed the gaps, proving his cleanup efforts. How could a jury ignore such damning threads weaving a portrait of intent over accident? Yet it raises a haunting question. In the rush to justice, did the system overlook the scars of an abused youth shaping his choices? Tammany Parish unfolded like a gripping courtroom drama in June 1998, with key moments that left spectators breathless and pondering the thin line between tragedy and monstrosity. Prosecutors opened strong, painting Hoffman as a predator who abducted Elliott at gunpoint from the Sheraton, forced the ATM withdrawal amid her pleas, drove to isolation for the rape, and ended it with a cold shot backed by her husband's heart-wrenching testimony of reporting her missing and identifying her body. The ATM video played to a hushed room, Elliott's fear palpable in grainy frames, while Hoffman's confession tape rolled, his voice admitting the acts but clinging to the accident claim, prompting fierce cross-examination that exposed inconsistencies. Defense attorneys fought back, not denying the shooting, but arguing no specific intent to kill, urging the jury to see the struggle as truth and spare him death due to his clean record, age of 18 and expert testimony on childhood abuse causing PTSD-like impulse. They even controversially blamed Elliott's naivety and urban safety, suggesting consensual elements, a tactic that backfired amid public outrage, including a scathing newspaper editorial. In the penalty phase, family and psychologists pleaded for mercy, while prosecutors hammered the heinousness, kidnapping, robbery, rape and cruelty with victim impact statements evoking Elliott's lost future as a wife dreaming of motherhood. A tense jury question about Hoffman's juvenile record went unanswered by the judge, leaving whispers of what secrets might have swayed them. What if those mitigators had tipped the scales? Could redemption have outweighed revenge? After deliberating the guilt phase, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on June 25. Finally, on September 11, 1998, the judge formalized the sentence, death by lethal injection, sealing Hoffman's fate on Louisiana's death row. But in that verdict, did society confront evil or merely perpetuate a cycle of pain for all involved? Behind the cold iron bars of Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, Jessie Dean Hoffman Jr. endured 27 years on death row, a place where time stretches into endless isolation, with cells measuring just 6 by 9 feet, limited sunlight, and the constant hum of despair from fellow inmates facing their own fate. Once a troubled 18-year-old, he transformed in ways that highlighted the human capacity for change, even in such an unforgiving environment. Yet the shadow of his brutal crime against Molly Elliott never lifted, a reminder of the irreversible harm he'd caused. Hoffman spent his days in quiet reflection, diving into books on healing and self-understanding, while committing hours to meditation as part of his deepening Buddhist practice, which helped him confront the childhood abuse and trauma that had scarred him. He poured his energy into mentoring others on the row, sharing lessons from his growth, and building bonds that showed a side of kindness few expected from a condemned man. Interactions with guards were routine and restrained, shaped by the strict protocols of death row, but he formed meaningful connections with inmates through shared stories of regret and survival. Guiding him from afar with letters and calls that fostered a deep trust, his son once said Jessie was the only one he could confide in completely, a bond that stood in stark contrast to Hoffman's own abusive upbringing. Remorse weighed heavily on him. He expressed paralyzing guilt for the pain inflicted on Elliott's family, channeling it into a mission to do good from his cell, like supporting his loved ones and seeking accountability without excuse. Appeals dragged on for decades, with lawyers battling tirelessly. One halt came from a federal judge over the nitrogen method, but ultimately they were exhausted, leaving Hoffman to face the end with a quiet acceptance born from years of introspection. In this limbo, he became a man who loved, mentored, and found spirituality, yet the system's unyielding grip underscored the tragedy. Could redemption ever outweigh the debt of a life taken? On March 18, 2025, the day of his execution dawned under the vast skies of Angola, a sprawling prison farm where the air hangs heavy with finality. Hoffman, who had been fasting for days in quiet preparation, spent the morning in his cell, likely in meditation, drawing strength from his Buddhist faith as the hours ticked down. Around 3 hours before the scheduled time, visitors arrived, his dedicated lawyers, Cecilia Trent Acosta, Kapal, Samantha Basalovich, Porsau, Sarah Ottinger, who'd fought for him 19 years, and later Caroline Tillman, 22 years on his case, along with his spiritual advisor Rimoku Gregory Smith, a serene Buddhist priest in black robes. In a poignant gathering, Hoffman greeted them with a firm handshake and warm embrace, his eyes locking deeply as he thanked them, wearing a black t-shirt emblazoned with life. They spoke of his son, how proud he'd made his father, and Rev Rimoku read aloud Hoffman's favorite passage from Thich Nhat Hanh's, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, reflecting on loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, words that brought a moment of peace amid the grief. Hoffman sat mostly silent, staring intently, eyes closing during the reading, absorbing the solace. Less than an hour before, the warden ended the lawyer's visit, leaving only the priest. Hoffman declined a last meal, choosing simplicity in his final hours. At 6:07, he was already strapped to the crucifix-like table in the stark cinderblock chamber, a plush gray blanket over him, his face hidden by a blue industrial-grade respirator mask, hands in a Buddhist mudra pose. Rimoku knelt nearby, chanting softly in rhythm that echoed through the room before, during, and after. Pure nitrogen gas flowed into the mask, depriving him of oxygen, a method new to Louisiana, intended to cause unconsciousness swiftly, but sparking debates on its humanity. His breathing grew uneven, chest rising sharply. He shook, fingers twitched, body pulled against restraints, head jerking inside the mask in voluntary responses to the suffocation, witnesses noted, as he likely slipped into unconsciousness. Movement ceased around 6, the gas continuing for 19 minutes until at 6:50 p.m. he was pronounced dead, his head tilted back with teeth bared in a frozen grimace. No family from either side witnessed it, amplifying the solitude of the moment for victims' loved ones still grappling with loss, and for Hoffman's supporters mourning a life ended by the state. In the end, Jessie Hoffman's story forces us to confront the complexities of justice, redemption, and human frailty. Does executing someone after decades of growth truly heal the wounds of crime, or does it simply extend the chain of suffering? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if this tale moved you, hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime's haunting reality.